This is the Dzogchen Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Come, let us explore what enlightenment is not, and then meditate like a Jedi. I'm pushing the wrong button. Let's try button number 7. Tonight I read a very sad post. A man explained, well, I don't know if it was a man, a person explained that they were giving up meditation. They explained that after years of diligent practice, they had increased their peace, they had increased their love, but they still weren't enlightened. And therefore, they were going to put their what time and effort they had left after a long day's work into ritualism in hopes of taking an auspicious rebirth. That is very, very sad. For if enlightenment is not peace and love, then what is it? You see, my friends, let me push the right button here in the right sequence for a refreshing change of events. There is a problematic definition of enlightenment floating about. There are people who insist that if you're truly enlightened, you will not feel pain physically, you will not feel pain emotionally, and there's certain emotions you will never feel ever again. But that is not what the Buddha taught. There are people who teach that enlightenment is difficult. There are people who teach enlightenment takes multiple oceans of lifetimes, an amount of time equal to the birth and death of not one but 3 universes. But that is not what the Buddha taught. When we read the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the second to last passage of the Buddha's discourse on the 4 bases of mindfulness, we read that one could master the Buddha's path in as little as 7 days. The Buddha didn't say that was only for special people at a special time in a special place. He didn't say it was only for those who are healthy or can make a heroic effort. He just said that this could be done in as little as 7 days. What is the cause of this confusion? I'm going to tap button 9 for a moment and share with you some visual aids. Archaeologists and anthropologists agree that there is evidence to suggest that when we go back 300,000 years, our Paleolithic ancestors enjoyed a culture that could be described as proto-communistic, in which people were encouraged, or in which the people experienced the causes to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. But things change. And after about 290,000 years, there was a Neolithic revolution punctuated by the advent of proto-capitalism, the same proto-capitalism that drove people to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. This is the same dynamism that is at play right now. Now, there are some people who are good-hearted and confused, and although they are rigid and fearful and superstitious and controlling and competitive and cruel, they think they're doing good work. And they just mindlessly repeat whatever they heard someone else say. But there are some who are deeply controlling and elitist. And these people deliberately commit the logical fallacy known as moving the goalposts. Because doing that ensures that the enthusiastic will be discouraged and brokenhearted and easier to manipulate and control and exploit. Albert Einstein was familiar with this. Perhaps that is why he explained that any educated idiot can make things more complicated, more difficult, and more violent. But that it takes a lot of courage and a little bit of genius to move in the opposite direction. In any spiritual movement, there's going to be a proto aspect and a institutional aspect. We see that in Buddhism. We see there was a proto-Buddhism and an institutional Buddhism. A proto-Buddhism where anyone could practice and master the practices, and institutional Buddhism where very few people were allowed to ordain, and people were just given insurmountable tasks, Sisyphean goals, if you will. So let's check this out. Let's clear away the malarkey. I think I skipped a step, so let's go back to the teaching outline for a moment. Now that we've explored disinformation's cause, let's explore what true enlightenment really is, shall we? What if enlightenment was nothing more than getting so good? Well, let me rephrase it. What if enlightenment was simply treating the Buddha's Eightfold Path as a tool chest and getting so good at using the Buddha's 8 tools that we use them spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively? That makes enlightenment seem more doable. Enlightenment then does not become what we feel and don't feel. It's simply mastering the tool chest. There's an extra layer of convenience. The seventh fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is mindfulness, which is a fancy term for watching the antics of mind. The eighth fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is meditation, which is a fancy term for resting in mind's non-graspable aspect. The more we practice this mindfulness and meditation, the more the remaining 6 folds literally take care of themselves. The more we practice mindfulness and meditation, the more we cannot help but notice change and non-graspability. We cannot help but notice the changing of the seasons, the changing of the lunar cycle, the rising and the setting of the sun, the swelling and the sinking of our chest. Ever changing, one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. The more we play with, the more we cooperate with our natural wiring to notice and release, the more we cannot help but practice kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and even kind commerce. The more we watch and rest in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation, the more we cannot help, the more we will notice that our choices and our utterances and our deeds flow, not from calculated contrivance, not from wild scatteredness, but from love's deeply centered spontaneity. This is known by many names. You could call it right effort, effortless effort, doing without doing, wu wei, going with the flow, or expedient means. That too is the effortless byproduct of mindfulness and meditation. Perhaps this is why the late Tulku Thondup insisted that the highest love was the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of watching the antics of mind and resting in its non-graspable nature. Now that we know that it is mindfulness and meditation that function as the dynamo that turn the gears and the cogs of our metaphoric enlightenment machine, let us take a closer look at how easy it is to practice these two. Those who are stuck, well, first of all, Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, including people, including meditation teachers. So when 90% of teachers, those who were rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, tell us that we have to actively focus and actively analyze, they might not know this, but doing so will inevitably so exhaust our dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortex that we cannot help but begin presenting with symptoms of depression, no less triggering our amygdala, which functions as the seat of both anxiety and aggression. Good news. Neither the amygdala nor the prefrontal cortex constitute the entirety of our central nervous system. Consider, if you will, the humble spinal cord. Its fancy name is autonomic nervous system. And when we take a break from the exhausting effort of actively competing against it, and instead passively cooperate with it, the aggression and anxiety of our amygdala is calmed, and the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated. That's pretty cool. Just as our alphabet has vowels and consonants, our autonomic nervous system has two subsystems. The first subsystem is the sympathetic nervous system. And it's the key to mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we're automatically accessing the middle bit of our spinal cord, whose fancy name is the sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to notice in a very special way. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice mind's antics of perception. You know, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, including the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, cognitions, recollections, and imaginings. The full spectrum. Everything from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. And remember, this is all automatic and effortless. Here's a rule of thumb. The most efficient way to practice mindfulness is to silently and mentally recite the verb watch every time we feel our chest swell with air. We talked about the autonomic nervous system having two components. What's the second component? That would be the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the key to meditation. Every time we exhale, we are wired to automatically relax. We're wired to automatically access the attic and the basement of that same spinal cord. These two extremes working as a team are known as our parasympathetic nervous system. They have evolved to help us to relax to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel non-graspable to the hand. And so we see whether we're talking about emptiness or whether we're talking about no self, both are just metaphors to describe the fleeting experience latent within each exhalation. And here's the rule of thumb. The key to meditating with the utmost of efficiency is to silently and mentally recite the verb rest every time we feel our chest subtly sink as gently we exhale. What is meditation? It's the time we set aside every 12 hours or so to formally watch and rest in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation. The seventh enlightenment factor is mindfulness. The seventh fold of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is mindfulness. The first enlightenment factor is mindfulness. If someone tells you that you have to stop experiencing the full spectrum of human emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings, then they are completely contradicting the Buddha's most essential teachings. The sixth enlightenment factor is coalescence. As our air coalesces in our lungs, our perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings coalesce in our mind. So a Buddha is not someone who stops noticing dread or desire. They're simply someone who's no longer, whose choices and utterances and deeds are no longer controlled by dread and desire. A Buddha is not someone who no longer feels anger. A Buddha is someone who, although feels anger, their choices and their utterances and their deeds are no longer controlled by their anger. And so, whether we are talking about peace or whether we are talking about love, the Buddha's path is very practical. And it can be mastered in as little as 7 days. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. 4. Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. Come, let us meditate like a Jedi right now. If you are joining me on the Tube app, as opposed to the Clock app, on the Tube app, you can see my face and you can see, all the visual aids. In the upper left-hand corner is the essence of the meditation instructions. If you're on the Clock app, the essence of the meditation instructions are right above it at 12 o'clock. So let us make ourselves comfortable and practice. Oh yes, I want to get back to the original lesson. that individual who turned to ritualism to secure an auspicious rebirth. If there is such a thing, the Buddha said that taught that the most effortless way, the most efficient way to take an auspicious rebirth is to train in love. And the most efficient way to train in love is simply to practice mindfulness and meditation, as we've seen during the diagrams. The more we cooperate with our autonomic nervous system, the more the anxious and aggressive amygdala is calmed, the more our empathetic anterior cingulate gyrus is stimulated. So, practicing enlightenment might not help us to be Gandalf the Grey and walk through walls, or be like Obi-Wan Kenobi and do the Jedi mind trick, but it will help us to be the loving person that our dog already thinks we are. The free fall of meditation can be jarring to our controlling tendencies. A workaround can be found by simply playing with a variation of Bengali crease count. Let us touch the tip of our left thumb to the lowest set of creases upon its left little finger, and then rest our left hand palms up in our lap. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb watch as our chest swells with breath, we could advance our right thumb up the creases and tips of each of its fingers. Let us practice together, beginning with its little finger. As you can see, I've run out of places upon which to count with my right thumb. That means it's time to return to my left hand and advance my left thumb up to the second set of creases. And so now you can see, you get a basic feel for how we could count 16 sets on our left hand of 16 inhalations each on our right hand. It takes a little more than a minute to count 16 inhalations on the creases and tips of our right hand. It takes a little bit more than 20 minutes to count 16 sets of 16 inhalations each upon the creases and tips of our left hand. While we are gathering our first 20 minutes, we could rest the great knuckle at the base of our right middle finger, palm the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. When we begin when we begin gathering our second collection of 20 minutes, we could rest the second knuckle of our right middle finger upon the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. And you guessed it, when we begin gathering our third collection of 20 minutes, we could rest the third knuckle of our right middle finger upon the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. Overwhelmed? The antidote is simple. It's repetition. Practice with me once every 12 hours or so, and within a week or two, the Buddhist path you could master. Sadly, many elitists insist that one must sit in the full lotus position in order to be a good meditator. But the Buddha never said that. And the most ancient Buddhist statuary demonstrates not the full lotus posture, but the quarter lotus posture, where each one shin is just stacked upon the other shin like the pieces of bread in a sandwich or like an Oreo cookie. The takeaway is simple. The third enlightenment factor is energy. When we can sit up straight during our inhalation, that's energizing. Any posture that we can sustainably assume, that can allow our spine to lengthen as we breathe in, is legitimate. Sometimes we can sit, sometimes we can stand, sometimes we can walk, sometimes we can lie down, all while watching and resting in harmony with our breathing. Heck, we can even practice this while making love. That's the key to tantric sex from the perspective of Buddhist Dzogchen. There is an ugly myth that meditation is all about concentrating upon our breath. And when we've noticed where our awareness has shifted, we bring it back to our breath. Now that sounds very simple and very folksy, but it's going to trigger our amygdala and strengthen our habits of being rigid and controlling. No, my friends, true meditation is to watch mind's antics, to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly watch mind's antics as we breathe in, and just rest and relax as we breathe out. That's it. This is the quick path to great liberation. The moment you have a specific question about the philosophies or techniques of Taoism, Buddhism, Tantra, Dzogchen, Zen, or Mahamudra, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. For I tend to check for questions about once every 5 minutes or so. The moment you have a specific question about the philosophy or practice of Taoism, Buddhism, Tantra, Dzogchen, Zen, or Mahamudra, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window, for I tend to check for questions about once every 5 minutes or so. In about 11 hours, I would very much like to return to the tomorrow's first lesson, followed by meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.